She would be stabbed 17 times. Police would falsely accuse a person of committing the murder, and to this day, the case is still unsolved. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Suzanne Jovin. Viewer discretion is advised. Real quick before we get started, of course, hello, my name is Mike. If you're new to the channel, I tell 3 true crime stories every single week here on YouTube on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. I also tell short form true crime stories over on TikTok every single day. That's where I'm more known. I have about 3 million or so followers over there, so feel free to follow if you like. The link will be in the link tree in the description of this video below. It also will pop up here towards the beginning and at the end of the video, so plenty of places for you to click and follow if you choose to. Also in the link tree below, you'll find my merch store. We do have like t-shirts and hoodies. We ship all over this wonderful rectangular planet of ours, so feel free to choose an item and order it if you want to. Lastly, if there's a case you want me to cover, just email me. My email is listed below in the description. Just email me the name of the case, where it happened, when it happened. I'll add it to the list. That list is now over 5,700 names. I will get to it eventually, the one you recommend, but I can't tell you when because I pick my cases out at random, to be fair. But it will happen at some point, yeah. Anyway, let's get into today's case, shall we? We shall. Okay. Stop talking to yourself, Mike. All right. Suzanne Jovin was born on January 26, 1977, and she was born in West Germany. Her father was a molecular scientist, and her mom was a cell biologist. Suzanne grew up in Germany, obviously, and then she attended a high school there in Germany, and over the years, her and her family would travel all over the place. She would frequent Mexico with her grandparents. She was very well-traveled. By the time she was a teenager, Suzanne knew how to speak German and English, and then eventually she would learn 2 other languages, and so she was very fluent in 4 different languages. I'm barely fluent in English, so that's pretty awesome. Suzanne was also a wonderful cello player. She loved playing the cello. She loved music. It was something she definitely excelled at, one of the many things she seemed to excel at. She was highly intelligent. At the time of this case, she is actually a student at Yale University. She was enthusiastic, full of joy. Because she had such an outgoing and very bubbly and friendly demeanor and personality, she made a lot of friends. She had a really large friend group. So essentially by this time, she's living in New Haven, Connecticut because she is attending Yale. Her mom also had gone to Yale. Suzanne was employed at the Davenport Dining Hall there on campus. And during her free time, she also tutored elementary school kids. She sang in the chorus there at Yale. And she performed with the Bach Society Orchestra. And then she skied and she loved to run. She played squash. She was someone who was just always doing something. She really didn't have a lot of downtime because she was just doing things. And then while attending Yale, she found a man, a boyfriend. His name was Roman Caudillo. Their relationship, by all accounts, was good. It was solid. And I want to tell you right now, when this case happened, he was actually on a train very far away. By 1998, she has been working on a double major, one in international studies and the other in political science. And she was working on her thesis at the time of this case. At 9:55 p.m. on December 4th, 1998, New Haven police would get a call. On Edge Hill Road, about a little less than 2 miles away from the campus of Yale, a passerby noticed a woman on the ground and bleeding profusely. She was lying kind of like on the grass, but also halfway on the sidewalk, and this sort of kind of taller grass. Police would arrive within minutes. By the time they got there, the woman had died. When the 911 call was made, she was still alive, but she was in really, really bad shape. When police arrived, they did notice that the woman had her throat cut, and they assumed that that was likely what killed her. But there were other indications that she had been stabbed as well numerous other times. The coroner would confirm this. She had been stabbed 17 times, primarily in her head and neck. She actually had the tip of the knife still stuck in her skull. They were able to quickly determine that this, unfortunately, was the body of 21-year-old Suzanne Jovin. The coroner would also determine that she was not sexually assaulted. She was fully clothed. There was no indications of any assault of that nature. Police would also discover that her wallet and purse were in her residence and nothing was stolen from her. So she wasn't robbed. She wasn't sexually assaulted. She was just stabbed. And the attack appeared to have happened from behind her. So this wasn't like she was approaching someone and then they just stabbed her. They snuck up behind her and did this. The first person they're of course going to think of is the boyfriend, but they were able to confirm almost immediately that he was nowhere even remotely close to where this happened. He could not have possibly done it, so he was ruled out. They also noticed that there were no defensive wounds, because typically if, in a situation where someone is being stabbed like this, you're instinctively going to put up your hands to, because she was stabbed, in the head, so you would instinctively put up your hands like this to try to block, that from happening, but they didn't find any defensive wounds whatsoever. That's another reason why they determined that this was a surprise from behind attack. I guess next to the bushes where her body was found, they found this bottle of Fresca, and that bottle of Fresca had, I guess, Suzanne's fingerprints on it, but it also had the palm print of somebody else that wasn't Suzanne. That would indicate, more than likely, that the palm print belonged to possibly the person who purchased this bottle, and Suzanne's fingerprints were on it, maybe because she had taken it and taken a sip. They don't know if it was connected to the murder or not. Police did eventually find out that that bottle of Fresca was purchased from a nearby market called Krauser's Market, which I believe is no longer open. It's now a different building, but I'm showing a picture of where it used to be. According to reports, though, police never actually interviewed any of the employees from Krauser's Market, especially the ones who were working the night of the murder, to see if they can say, hey, do you recognize anyone? Do you recognize Suzanne? Was she in here? Were there any strange people who bought it? They didn't ask them at all. If the market had a camera, a CCTV camera or not, but police did not recover any video evidence from the market either. And now that footage is long gone, if there was footage. But I can't confirm if there was or not. Now, eventually, they would say that there was DNA found underneath Suzanne's finger. One article I read noted that the DNA found under the fingernails may have come from an actual cross-contamination from the forensic people analyzing the finger scrapings. So that DNA evidence was useless. If there was another person's DNA, like from the killer, for example, they would never know because it was contaminated by the lab. Suzanne Jovin did not have any known enemies. There were no issues where she had been arguing with someone, she had gotten into a fight with anyone. There were no stories from her friends or family to state that she had any scary ex-boyfriends or upset exes or anything like that. Nothing. They don't know who on earth would do this to her. But within 4 days of the murder, police said, we know who did it. A man named Jim Vandeveld. He was a professor there at Yale, and he was Suzanne's senior thesis advisor. What did police base that information on, that they think he's the killer? Nothing. Literally nothing. They just honed in on him for absolutely no reason whatsoever. They had no physical evidence connecting him to the murder. They had no circumstantial evidence connecting him to the murder. There was no proof that there was a relationship between the student and the professor. They interviewed many people with regards to the relationship that Suzanne had with this individual. Nothing was untoward. Even her boyfriend was no, there was nothing going on between them, nothing. So where they got this sudden oh, he did it, nobody really knows. They just named him the suspect. And almost immediately, it ruined his life. The Yale decided to cancel all of his further classes, and they basically removed him from Yale based on the fact that police were considering him a suspect. with no proof, with no evidence. His career was affected immediately, and it ruined him. Van de Velde was, by all accounts, a really fantastic instructor there at the school. Everybody loved him. He was a bit uptight. He was certainly very much by the book. He had attended Yale himself. He had traveled abroad. Eventually, he found himself back in New Haven, where he got a job at Yale. No one could really say anything all that bad about him. He was a fantastic advisor there at the school, a very fantastic professor. He had zero criminal history. He had a perfect record there at the school, never had any infractions, never had students complaining about him. So again, why was he the suspect? Police brought him in and interviewed him for like 4 or 5 hours, and they drilled him. And he was like, listen, I will answer every question you have. Give me a lie detector test. I'll take it. You want my DNA? Take it. You want my hair? Take it. You want my fingerprints? Here you go. I'll take a lie detector test. And police were like, no, we're not gonna have you do that. And he's even like, here's the keys to my car. Examine my car. Here's the keys to my house. Examine my house. Search for evidence. You're not going to find any, but search. The police wouldn't do it. They wouldn't look at his car. They wouldn't look at his apartment, but they're still like, no, you're our suspect. Eventually, they never brought him back in for questioning. He was never actually arrested, so he was never charged with anything. But because of how they treated him, like he was the guy with no evidence whatsoever, his career was ruined because of it. Students at Yale were like, it was probably a fellow student who did it, you know? I mean, more than likely, could have been a stalker of hers that she didn't know she had. Could have been, it was more than likely someone around her age and around the school. But they were wasting their time investigating this Van de Velde individual. Eventually, Van de Velde would sue the New Haven police and Yale, and they settled out of court. So I don't know what the amount he got was, but he basically won. He would end up getting some very prolific work. He would work at Johns Hopkins Center. He was, I guess, working in advanced governmental studies. Now, years later, he is kind of back in the full swing of things, and he is back to doing what he was always good at doing. But in 2013, New Haven police would finally come out and say that Van de Velde was no longer a suspect. However, they did not ever publicly apologize to him, and they did not publicly say that they were wrong. They just said he's no longer a suspect. In 2013. So, kind of back to the investigation, if we can call it that, they discovered that Suzanne had sent an email to a friend. The email was sent at 9:02 p.m. that night. This friend, I guess, asked Suzanne if they could borrow her GRE book, or Graduate Record Examinations book. Suzanne's email said to that person, well, I actually had lent that book to another student, and that student was supposed to return them to her. Who the student was that she was currently emailing and who the student was that she borrowed the book from has not been publicly named, nor do I know if any of them are suspects. But that's just, they were kind of looking at her movements on the night of her murder. Again, there were no indications that this was a robbery. It could have been a robbery gone wrong. This person may have tried to rob her, but then realized she didn't have her wallet or purse or money or anything on her, and then I guess stabbed her because of it. The robbery aspect is just not really a possibility, as is, like I said, the sexual assault possibility. Now, there were witnesses who would go to police with stories, but it does not appear that police, at the time at least, took those stories seriously. A couple of witnesses would all say they heard on the night of the murder, shortly before her body was found, there were the sounds of a very loud argument between a male and a female. They were arguing over something. One witness said they heard the woman scream, "Why are you doing this to me? How can you do this to me?" It's not something you would typically, I mean, if you're being stabbed, that's probably not something you would probably say. You probably say like, help me, please help me. This guy's, you would say something in terms of helping, right? But this witness overheard these full sentences of, "Why are you doing this to me?" Not to say that Suzanne wouldn't have screamed that. It seems a little far-fetched, I guess. But there were the sounds of a man and a woman arguing near where her body was eventually found. Another witness said they saw a light-colored mid-sized sedan parked, I guess, on the same street where Suzanne was found. And this witness saw the driver's side door open, and then there was a man and a woman arguing by the car. It was dark, and so they didn't really get the greatest look at the person because I think the witness was driving by. So they were like in motion as they were witnessing this. But again, it would be near where Suzanne was eventually found murdered. Was that Suzanne arguing with her killer? Could have been, but it also may not have been. Another witness told police that they saw a man running from the area where the body was eventually found. And that is where this composite drawing comes from. This person, I guess, was not in a car. They had just witnessed this person like on the street. Was running. The person was a white male, somewhere between their mid-20s to mid-30s. They had dark blonde hair. They were wearing dark pants and a green jacket. And they were running pretty hastily from eventually where the body was found. And so I think this was years later, but they would put out the composite drawing of this man in hopes that someone may recognize him. He may not be a suspect. He may not be the one who did this, but he is a person of interest. That person, however, has never come forward on their own. Another witness came forward. This was an unidentified female who said she was driving that night and she had parked her car when all of a sudden a white male came up to her car to the passenger side window and pressed his face against the window and looked in at her, and then he bolted. Then he's left. That's terrifying, first of all. And this was not next to where, Suzanne was found eventually, but this was in the same area. This guy was also wearing a green jacket. And so it kind of sounds like green jacket guy may be the actual person, but who that is, nobody knows. Around the year 2000, I guess Yale University would hire their own private investigators who were both, there was two of them, former NYPD detectives who were renowned for their work. They would publicly come out and basically say to the New Haven Police Department, like, the whole Vandeveld thing, that was extremely wrong. That should never have even happened. And I think they would find out that one of the reasons why Vandeveld was considered a potential person of interest or a suspect was because Suzanne had gone to him that afternoon to drop off her thesis to him. But that was like hours before she would eventually be found killed. That happened, they found out, these detectives, at 4 p.m. that day. She had also been working on her applications for graduate school to schools like Columbia and Georgetown. Then she went to Trinity Lutheran Church and she was hosting a pizza, making party. And she was doing this with a group that she helped found called Best Buddies. It was an international organization that was catered to the mentally disabled teens and youth of the area. And Suzanne, she ran the Yale chapter of this group. She was at this party and she helped clean up, and that was around 8:30 p.m. or so. She then sent an email at 9:02 p.m. and then she was also observed at 9:15 p.m. that night by a fellow student, and he was the last known person to see her alive. So they do know that she was alive at 9:15 p.m. and she was essentially dead by 9:55 p.m. So they have a very small window of time when this occurred. Did police interview the person who last saw her? I believe they did. And from what I understand, that individual was not considered a suspect. And that person was, I believe, ruled out. But to this day, Suzanne's murder has remained unsolved. There are no suspects. There are no leads. There are no persons of interest. There is nothing. They have very little evidence. If they have DNA evidence, they haven't really said it out loud. They have this palm print on a soda bottle with her fingerprints on it as well. They don't know if the palm print belongs to her killer. It still to this day has never matched anyone in the system. I want to say they've run it against any persons of interest they may have had over the years and ruled them out, but I can't say that for certain. But somebody just came up behind her and stabbed her 17 times and then cut her throat and left part of the knife in her skull. This was a vicious and completely random, it seems like, attack. But was she killed by somebody she knew? Who knows? Was this just a super random, spur-of-the-moment attack by some random psycho on the streets? Who knows? Police were so laser focused on this completely wrong suspect that they may have lost a lot of proper investigation towards other people or the community. It felt like they wanted it to be this guy just for whatever reasons they had, which were none. They had no reasons. It's so baffling to me that Van de Velde was ever even considered an actual suspect, considering there's been no other named suspects in this case. Why him? Why him of all people? Because she saw him that day? Okay, she saw a lot of people that day. That doesn't make a person a murderer. There is a very solid chance that her killer is this man in this green jacket that was observed by a couple of people near the area where she was killed. And so somebody out there has to recognize the image of this man. This would have been in 1998, so we're talking 25 years ago, so obviously he's going to look a little bit different and aged, but there's a pretty solid chance that someone has to recognize him. Someone has to know who this guy is. And odds are, he's still alive and kicking. It wasn't that long ago. Somebody somewhere out there knows the truth, and perhaps that somebody is you. You may have been talked to by the killer. You may have information. The killer may have bragged about doing it, and you have that information. You don't have to say who you are if you call police. You just have to say what you know. And so if you have information about the murder of 21-year-old Suzanne Jovin, who was killed roughly 2 miles away from the Yale campus in 1998 on December 4th, please call 203-676-1575 with any information you have. I do know that there is a fairly large monetary reward to be given to anyone who provides information in helping capture Suzanne's killer. 25 years ago, she was just on her way back to her home. She was on a walk. She was out and about that night. Somebody came up behind her, stabbed her 17 times, and cut her throat. She died horrifically, brutally, and painfully. Somebody out there has to know the information to help her family get peace and some kind of closure in whatever way that could be. Somebody out there has to know the information that will help Suzanne Jovin get the justice she rightfully deserves. But that is it for this case. True crime, Bruni Dooney Dingleberry Dongs. I hope you found it interesting. As usual, please subscribe, give the video a like so more people can see it, and then that increases the odds of the one right person seeing it, because you never know. You never know. I don't care if it's my video or someone else's video, just someone needs to see something that helps jog their memory to help solve this case. Please also follow me over on TikTok, where I post every single day. Check out the merch store if you like to. Recommend a case to my email, just the name, where it happened, when it happened. I'll add it to the list. It's a big list. Might take me a while to get to yours, of course. But that is it for this video. I'm not feeling super great today, so I'm just going to wrap it up. And I'm going to say goodbye, true crimers. And yeah, still kind of made it awkward. Okay.